So today I'm going to show you how to replace an impeller and flow sensor on a 2021 Lay Z Spa Hydrojet pump. So this is the pump upside down. First job is to undo the 7 screws around the side. Next thing to do is either lay the pump on its side with the thermal reset button and the yellow sticker facing upwards, or carefully roll it the right way up and gently lift the top cover, exposing this wire that you need to unclip. Carefully cut the cable tie, joining the 2 wires together, making sure you don't cut any of the wires. Next thing you need to do is unclip the cable by pushing the lever down and squeezing the little tabs on the other side. So this is briefly how to take it apart. Undo that one that undoes the pump. Undo 4 screws there. 1, 2, 3. One under there, 4. Undo that one. Undo this one so that you can pivot it. Take that one out completely from there, and then this panel comes off. When you put it on, just make sure that these rubber bits are nice and neat underneath. So you undo that one, take that off, undo these 4, take this off, undo that one there to be able to get that off. Push a pin in there to get these out. 1, 2. Undo these wires. 1, 2. Obviously take that one off when you take the lid off. Just bear in mind that when you do put it back on again, there's a little clip, a little square piece there, so it only goes in one way. So here it is again, but in the right sequence. First thing you need to do, because you can't get this panel off, is undo the pipe, undo the Jubilee clip and remove it. Next thing you need to do is remove all of this together. So undo this collar, undo this Jubilee clip, and then carefully prise it off. Just wriggle it a little bit. You don't really want to be upsetting the white pipe against the other one, because there's an O-ring inside there you don't want to disturb. When you take the clear pipe off, you want to try and take it off really gently so that it doesn't disturb the O-ring on the inside, which will give you access to the flow sensor housing, these 2 screws here. Next thing to do is undo the Jubilee clip here underneath the heater matrix. So now we undo the 2 screws either side of the flow sensor housing. It's easier if you remove this panel first. That small hole there only goes one way, so it's easy enough to put back on again. So 1 screw either side of the flow sensor housing. You might notice that I'm using one of those magnetic dishes that you can put screws in, but you can use just a little Tupperware container or something. I'm now undoing the Jubilee clip I mentioned just now, the one underneath the heater matrix, and unscrewing the cable that goes from the pump to the transformer. At this stage it looks like there might be enough room to get the pump out without removing the heater matrix, but there isn't enough room, so we need to unclip this red and black wire and these 2 here. This part is a little fiddly, they don't just pull off. You need to just pull back the plastic sheath a little bit, and where the hole is, if the flat part of the spay terminal is facing away from you, you need to push a pin in there. If the flat part of the spay terminal is facing towards you, you need to just pull this little lever back with a pin or a needle. So next we need to be able to lift the heater matrix. So we need to undo this earth wire and remove the 4 screws holding the heater matrix in place. Then we can just gently prise the heater matrix upwards and wiggle the pump out nice and slowly. Don't catch it on any wires or anything, and there it is. So the impeller is inside here. All we need to do is remove the 6 screws on the inside of the pump. And if you need to, put your finger underneath in the corner ones to keep the nut in place. Next job is to inspect and replace any O-rings that might need replacing, because they do perish with the chlorine. So here's what the inside of the pump looks like. Grab a 2 or 3 inch screw and screw into the rubber end of the impeller to pop it out. Sometimes if there's a ceramic shaft, you might find that a little bit of it snapped inside. You may need to get a pair of long nose pliers just to tease that one out. There's an example that I had. That one was snapped in 6 places. So there's the wood screw with the end of the impeller. Next thing you want to do is replace the gasket. This one's quite thin. You can get silicone ones or black ones. Pop the other end of the impeller out. Sometimes they come out with the rubber end, sometimes they don't. Just do the same with the other end. Just screw a screw into it and pop it out. Clean both surfaces. Clean the surface on the top and the bottom. Pop the impeller in, pop in the new O-ring or seal. And as you can see, the seal's quite a bit thicker than the other one. So give both surfaces a good clean. Pop the impeller in, pop the seal in, and then put the 2 bits together. It's easier to line it up if you just look down through and then you can see where the end of the impeller is. Make sure you squish it together nice and tight. If you've got sausage fingers, then it's sometimes easier to use a screwdriver on the floor for those really fiddly bolts in the corners. Just make sure when you're doing it that the O-ring hasn't just popped out of the groove. It'd also be prudent to replace the flow sensor seal. We get ours from the UK's leading supplier, headseal.com. Some are round, some are square. I'll leave a link in the description below. So when you tighten the bolts in the pump, just tighten them up in sequence, working in opposite corners, doing up a little bit at a time each, and that way the seal won't pop out. Next thing to do is put the Jubilee clip back on the pipe, making sure the hole in the Jubilee clip lines up with a little pimple in the pipe to make sure it's the right way round. If you've got any, a little bit of silicone spray or silicone grease to make sure it goes on nice and snug and easy. This is the reason that we took the heater matrix up, because it's easier to do it this way. You'd never be able to get it back on otherwise. When you put it back together, just make sure the wires follow the same route they did before. So around this side of the heater matrix and then this side of the flow sensor. Also make sure that the wire between the pump and the transformer takes the same route it did before. So now we want to be putting the 2 screws back in the flow sensor housing and the 4 screws back in the heater matrix. As you can see, there's a slot in the flow sensor housing and the 4 holes in the heater matrix need lining up too. So a little bit of lateral movement there. Watch you don't squish this wire when you put it back together, by the way. So we're going to be lining those up with the indentations they were before. So start with the flow sensor housing, just line that one up. Put the 2 screws in there and then put the 4 screws in the heater matrix. You want to be doing this before you do up the Jubilee clip underneath the heater matrix. So do all the solid stuff first, then the flexible stuff afterwards. So 2 screws in the flow sensor housing, reattach the earth wire, 4 screws in the heater matrix. Next thing is to reattach these 2 wires, this red plug, black plug, and a little bit of silicone grease or spray on this pipe. Tighten this Jubilee clip underneath the heater matrix. Now at this stage, if all you wanted to do is replace a flow sensor and or seal, all you would need to do is remove the 4 screws on the top of the flow sensor housing. Just make sure you put it back the same way it came out, with that flap facing towards you, not away from you. As you can see, you must replace the seal because they do squish. Back to the reassembly. So this panel will only go on one way. The bottom hole on the left hand side is the smallest one, so it just goes one way only. Make sure that the rubber seals on all 4 pipes go back in nice and snug and don't get pinched. So next thing to do is put this rubber pipe on. You'll notice that the panel's still a little bit wobbly, which is good. So you put this one on first, and the best way to do it is just pull that panel back just a little bit, get the groove in the right place, and then just pop that pipe back on. You might need to lift the white one up a little bit. Next, you go to this one, the left hand side. Make sure that this one goes back on nice and square and doesn't dislodge any of the seals inside. Push it right against that groove there. Make sure again it's nice and square, and then do the collar up. If it's not square, you won't be able to do up that collar. So just make sure that's nice and square and sat next to that groove, so you can do that one up. Don't fully tighten it just yet, because you need to pivot this one back into this panel, making sure that the groove goes back where it was before, so this side of the panel for half of the groove. And again, making sure before you do that that the other ones are sat nicely in the groove. Last job is to tighten this Jubilee clip, make sure everything else is tight and reattached, and carry the pump outside ready to test. Reattach this wire, just push it in, you don't need to do any levers or anything. And now the good bit. An easy scale kit available from our website, Amazon or eBay. Brilliant for testing the pump off the tub. So you need to be checking for leaks around wherever you've replaced anything. Flow sensor housing, if you've done a flow sensor seal, the join in the pump, and any joins in any Jubilee clips or anything like that. Sometime around September 2021, Lay Z Spa changed these fittings slightly, but don't worry, our kit fits both. Once you've fully tested the pumps for leaks and make sure it's working properly, you need to put the top cover on, making sure you don't squish any wires or any of them 4 rings on the front of the pump. So squeezing the top and the bottom together with your hands, roll it back over so it's upside down, and make sure that it's lined up perfectly in the middle. Just squeeze the sides together and make sure that it closes the gap. Last thing to do is to put the 7 screws back in the middle of the pump. And that's it, you're done.